defense that you'll want to keep an eye on today. Before we get into that, as always, you can be a part of our conversation. If you're over on Facebook, just Facebook today, I know we're streaming to Periscope and YouTube as well. We will take some of your questions over on Facebook. Leave us whatever is on your mind, anything you want us to talk about. Pete and I will get to some of your thoughts toward the end of our conversation today. Eagles cornerback Darius Slay said he's coming off of one of the worst games of his NFL career. He was matched up against Seahawks wide receiver DK Metcalf last week. Metcalf had 10 catches for 177 yards. Packers wide receiver Davante Adams is looking at that and he's like, yeah, I would like in on that next, please. Pete, how likely is it that Slay follows Davante Adams regardless of where Adams is lined up across the formation?
You know, I'm not sure because there's two ways that teams approach this. One is to put your best guy on him and have him follow him anywhere. The other is you want to double him anyway. You can double him because you're not afraid of the other receivers. So why put your best guy on him when there's going to be help there, when you can have your best guy take somebody else out of the game and have Adams doubled by two other guys. So I really don't know what they'll do. It'll end up being a mix of both. Maybe Slay will follow him some, but they'll also have the corners stay on their sides at times. I think some teams just like to mix it up.
Let's take a look at the trenches now. Packers right guard Lucas Patrick is active today after he was dealing with a toe injury this week. That means Patrick and right tackle Billy Turner are going to face off against Eagles defensive tackle Fletcher Cox and Eagles defensive end Brandon Graham. Both Cox and Graham are combined for 12.5 sacks this season. How prepared are Turner and Patrick to go up against Cox and Graham?
You know, Cox is probably one of the 2 or 3 best defensive tackles in the league. And, you know, to get off topic a little bit, but, we talk about where Elton Jenkins should play. Where should be his long-term position because he's so good. He could maybe even be a left tackle. Now they have Bakhtiari signed. Could be a right tackle. This is an argument for keeping him at guard because he's such a good guard. And you're going to run into a few times a year the Fletcher Coxes of the world. And so to have a really good guy on your inside to help block him, I know you're asking about Patrick, but Jenkins will be involved in this too as the center, or you could keep Jenkins at center too. But this is an argument for keeping him at one of the 3 inside guys, is to have him there to help block guys like this. Whoever's blocking him, and I'm sure Cox will be moving around in between those 3 spots. They have their hands full. I'm sure the Packers will try to double team him quite a bit because he can be a dominant game-wrecking player.
The Packers will be rolling out their 6th starting offensive line combination today with center Corey Linsley inactive due to an MCL sprain. The Eagles, on the other hand, have it a little bit worse. They're rolling out their 11th starting offensive line combination today. The Eagles' offensive line as a whole has given up 46 sacks. That's the most in the NFL. How likely is it that the Packers pass rushers can jack up that number today?
Well, this is their chance, and I'm sure the line has a lot to do with it. I mean, I think they've lost their top 3 tackles this year, if I remember right. Lane Johnson's one of the best right tackles in the league. Dillard was a first-round pick a year ago, so he's a promising guy. I mean, there are not many teams in this league that can survive that, so I'm sure that's one of the reasons. But quarterbacks are also responsible for sacks, and Carson Wentz is having a terrible time. He looked like he was the next star of the league a couple of years ago when they went to the year they won the Super Bowl before he got hurt in December that year. And he has not been the same guy since. And just watching snippets of their games, this season I've seen maybe a half or a quarter a couple times. Every once in a while he'll make a play and you go, okay, that's, the guy you remember seeing. But there are other times where he's holding the ball and getting sacked and trying to get away and he can't. And so he's probably as responsible for those high sack totals, at least equally with the offensive line. And, yeah, this is a great chance for Darius Smith and Preston Smith to add to their sack totals, and Kenny Clark to add to their sack totals because the Eagles are really vulnerable.
It's been a tough decline for Carson Wentz this season. He has thrown 15 interceptions this season. Perhaps he will hand off the ball a little bit more. The Eagles elevated practice squad running back Jordan Howard to the active roster today. He and Miles Sanders, if you remember last season and the Packers lost to the Eagles, they combined for over 150 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns in that Packers loss. What are the Packers going to do today to stop Howard and Sanders?
Yeah, that game was one of the red flag games last year in the middle of the season that showed or was an indication of the Packers' poor run defense that ended up imploding on them in the NFC Championship game. And if I'm the Eagles, my game plan is to run it and keep running it and keep running it, because that's where the Packers are vulnerable. And that, amongst other things, you're keeping the ball. If you're getting first downs, you're keeping the ball out of Aaron Rodgers' hands. So I would think the Eagles were going to see a ton of both of those guys, especially Sanders. And I think the Eagles would be crazy not to have a really run-oriented game plan for the Packers today. And whether the Packers can do anything, can stop it, I mean, your guess is as good as mine. They've been pretty shaky all year. I was really interested to see the impact that Anthony Rush might have. 360 pounds, 6'4". This guy is huge. I've never seen him play, so I don't know if he's any good or not. But I would have been interested to see him play. Alas, he is inactive today.
No Anthony Rush today, and no wide receiver Tavon Austin, who the Packers both recently signed earlier this week. Neither of them will be making their Packers debut today. Let's just hit on the inactives really quickly in case we didn't already hit on them already. Worth repeating, I suppose, that Lucas Patrick will be active today. He will likely start at right guard. Zadarius Smith, the Packers outside linebacker, earlier this week was dealing with an ankle injury. It's something that he has been nursing all season seemingly, and he re-aggravated it in practice on Thursday. He did not practice on Friday. However, he is active in today's game. The full inactives list: quarterback Jordan Love, as usual, is inactive. Tavon Austin. Cornerback Josh Jackson is inactive yet again, who's dealing with a concussion. Outside linebacker Jonathan Garvin, healthy scratch. And defensive lineman Anthony Rush. Any immediate reactions to that inactives list, Pete?
Jackson's, it's a couple games now with the concussion, so that must have been a pretty severe injury. So that's the big one, and I think everybody who follows this team was interested to see Rush, to see what he's, what kind of player he is, and we're not going to get that chance. So and Tavon Austin, of course, to see what role they'd use him in. See him on a couple jet sweeps. He was a super dynamic guy coming out of college. Now he's 29 and had a lot of injuries, so who knows what he's got left. But I think a lot of us were looking forward to seeing what kind of player these guys might be. They're probably taking a time to get acclimated to the offense and all that. So next week, I guess, would be a lot more likely. I would think they'd want to get those guys in the field as soon as possible, though.
A player that is active today is inside linebacker Chris Barnes, who is active for the first time in several weeks, as he spent quite a while on COVID-19 reserve. This is his first game back. He was listed on the injury report this week with a calf injury. However, he is active and ready to go. How likely is it that Barnes spends any time playing, especially special teams, now that Kamal Martin and Christian Kirksey have solidified themselves as the starting inside linebackers?
I almost always in these situations guess that it's going to be mostly special teams and not much on defense. And I'm lucky if I hit 500 on those. So your guess is as good as mine how much he plays on defense. But yeah, I would think he's been out for a while. Martin's the more talented player of the two. I would think they'll get Barnes as much special teams work as they can. But on defense, maybe they have him worked into one package maybe. A very specific nickel or dime package they might have him in. That would be my best guess as to the most that he would play.
All right, let's head over to Facebook for some of your questions right now. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Let's start with Joe. Joe says, outside linebacker Preston Smith better step up his game. He has been taking plays off. Going into the game against the Bears last week, Preston Smith only had a sack and a half. Then finally something clicked for Preston Smith because he had a sack, 2 quarterback hits, and a fumble recovery for a touchdown. How likely is it that Smith has a better game today?
That had to have been a burn in his saddle that he didn't start last week. And I know it's a package-related thing as much as anything, but if you looked at the snap counts, he and Rashawn Gary, I think there was a 1 snap difference. I think they were both in the low 40s, if I remember right, which has not been the case all season. So, I'm sure the message has gotten home. I mean, it's not all about messages. Gary was playing better than him, so I would see why they'd want to play him more. But you got to think that'll be a burr in the saddle for for Preston Smith. If it's not, I don't know what would be.
Let's go over to Rick on Facebook. Rick wants to know, is center Corey Linsley out for the year? Linsley was placed on injured reserve yesterday, which means he is going to be out for a minimum of 3 weeks, could possibly be longer. How soon are the Packers expecting Linsley back?
I don't know those, but the MCL is 2 to 6 weeks. So it could be anywhere in there depending on how much it's torn, because that does repair itself. So, you know, your guess is as good as mine. I think when the injury first happened, our Tom Silverstein reported that they didn't think it was real serious. I guess that meant more than anything it was an ACL, for instance. But, you know, you would think maybe they're thinking back for the playoffs.
Possibly. We'll keep an eye on that, and we'll give you any updates as we continue to learn more about Corey Linsley's injury. Let's take a question here from Matthew. Hello, Matthew, over on Facebook. Matthew wants to know, who will cornerback Jair Alexander cover in today's game against the Eagles? One would imagine that the Packers would want to put Alexander on the Eagles' leading wide receiver. And who is the Eagles' leading wide receiver? Well, that would be wide receiver Travis Fulgham, who has the most touchdowns and the most receiving yards out of anyone on the team. And if you've forgotten, he also spent a week with the Packers in training camp this season. Fulgham has seen his targets and his yards decline as some of the wide receivers on the Eagles roster have gotten healthy. How likely is it that Alexander travels with Fulgham today?
I would think this is a game where you don't travel. You just keep guys on their side. I'm not sure that Fulgham or anybody on that receiving core warrants having somebody travel with them unless they think for some reason that the matchup is really, really good and there's just something they see favorable there. So my guess would be that they'll just keep guys on their side, but you never know what they're concocted and what they've cooked up after watching all that Eagles tape on Monday and Tuesday this week.
Let's take a question from our friend Eric, friend of the show. Eric, good to see you. Eric wants to know, could the Packers potentially see Eagles quarterback Jalen Hurts today? It's a good question. How likely is it that the Eagles would want to roll out Hurts and some of, he has some other talents beyond pure quarterback. How likely is it that they would want to use him today?
Yeah, I think they used him a little more last week, right, than they had been, and they've talked about wanting to mix him in. And with Wentz's struggles, it's not like you're, taking the best quarterback in the league out to run the stuff with your backup who can do some of the running stuff too. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see him out there. I don't know, 5 to 10 snaps, something like that.
It's certainly a possibility. We will keep our eyes out on that when the game starts today. Let's take a question from our friend Craig over on Facebook. Craig says, if the Packers can't beat a 3-win team like the Eagles, their Super Bowl chances will diminish considerably. The Eagles have a top 10 defense, however, collectively as a whole, especially with this offense, the Eagles have struggled mightily this season. How important is it that the Packers win and win resoundingly today?
The win is the huge thing. If they don't win big, the Eagles are a bad team, but, I don't know that it would say that much. It happens all the time. Even that Jacksonville team a few weeks ago, they're not a good team, but it's mostly because of the quarterback. They actually had some talent on that team, I thought. So the winning is the big thing. And, if I'm the Packers, I really want that home field edge because, all the teams that all the top contenders are from warm climates. They don't want to come here in January. Are you kidding me? So if I'm the Packers, I really pushing hard to get that best record, to get the home field edge for the playoffs. The crowds aren't going to matter this year for the home field, but this is the one place where the environment's going to matter.
I don't want to be out here in January.
No, neither do I.
So if the Packers want to make the most out of the playoffs, they're going to want to secure that first seed. That is going to do it for us today here at Lambeau Field, everyone. I will be back following the game with Ryan Wood to wrap everything up and to take your questions once again. So make sure come back to Facebook, Periscope, and YouTube, and we will see you then. For Pete Dougherty,